Blender is an exciting and super powerful tool that is totally free. Today I'll be showing you how to make this fun little cannon that's defending its treasure from any grubby gross pirates that may show up. We'll be modeling, texturing, lighting, and rendering this cannon today. There's a ton to do, so let's get to it. My name is Elijah Sheffield. I go by Sweet Boy Motion on the internet. I'm a motion designer, an illustrator, and an antique stamp enthusiast. And today, I'm teaming up with the fine folks at School of Motion to bring you this info-packed tutorial made just for you. Let's take a look at today's agenda. We'll start with a little modeling, dabble with lighting and world setup, perfect our materials and shaders, and finally, we'll finish it all out with an Instagram-ready render that will impress every one of your extended family members that follows you but never posts anything. With our agenda set, let's get going. We're going to start by creating the cannon itself in Blender. We'll be using a technique called box modeling, which is essentially just pushing and pulling the vertices of a primitive object until we get a look that we like. We'll do a little light box modeling, and then we'll apply modifiers to make it look even better. Now let's hop into Blender, and I'll walk you through it. So we just need to make a basic cylinder. So we'll go over here with Shift A and grab a cylinder just like that. Now we're gonna go down here and change a couple properties. We're gonna change the vertices to 12, that way it's a little bit more wieldy, and then change the cap fill type to triangle fan instead of ingon. And all right, there we have a cylinder. Off to a good start. All right, with our cylinder made, I'm gonna hit tab to go into edit mode, and I'm just gonna select this top vertex here. I'm gonna hit X and then vertices, and there we have a open cylinder. Perfect for cannon making. Now I'll hit tab to go back into object mode, and then S and Shift Z, scale on the Y-axis, or X and Y-axis rather, just until I get something that looks a little cannony. Now I'll hit tab to go back into edit mode, and then Command R, add an edge loop. I'll bring it down here, left click to confirm. And now we're just gonna start shaping things. So I'll hold Z and go into wireframe mode, and I'll select these bottom vertices and I'll kind of make it more spherical at the bottom here. That way it just kind of looks a bit more like a cannon, something like that. And then I'll select all these top edge loop right here and scale, hitting S, and then I'll hit G and Z to move only in the Z axis, and I'll bring that down just a little bit. Just want it to look a little chunkier, a little fatter, and then I'll hit A to select all the vertices, and again S and Shift Z to scale on the X and Y axis, just like that. And it really, I'm just pushing and pulling things until it looks how I want it. So this is totally up to the user's discretion to make it look exactly the way you want it. So now that we have all this, I'm going to add one more edge loop, and I'll hit Command R, just like that. With the edge loop already added right there, we're going to hit Command B to bevel that. And we'll just drag out until we get something like that. That's perfect. Now we'll go ahead and hit E to extrude those edges, and right click to confirm that. And then S, and again scale on the X and Y, holding Shift Z. We'll pull it out to there. Now, I don't really like the way this shear is kind of right here, so we're going to select this top edge loop, whoopsie, there we go, and scale till it's just about flush, just like that. That's looking about right. All right, that is looking perfect. So before we do anything else, we need to apply our scale just so we don't get anything wonky. So I'll go back into solid view and I'll hit Command A and apply the scale. I'm going to go one more pass over it, just adjusting things so that it looks cannony to me. So let's add some modifiers. With the object selected, let's go over to the wrench, and we're gonna click add modifier and look up solidify, just like that. Now we can get a little closer here so we can see what's happening. And you see it's adding just a little bit of geometry on the inside and a little thickness to the whole thing. So we want this to be a bit more dramatic. So we're just gonna change the thickness right here. Might tick even thickness just so it fills that out evenly. And we'll get something like that. That looks about right, because we're going for a chunky stylized look, right? So it needs to feel a little bit thick. Next, we need another modifier called bevel. So we'll add a bevel modifier. And as you can see, it's getting beveled all over the place, and we really don't want that. We want a lot more control over where it's beveling. So we're gonna change the limit method to weight, and then we're gonna hit tab into edit mode and grab this top edge loop holding Alt and clicking, and then Command E, and then clicking edge bevel weight like that. We'll drag all the way out, click to confirm, and there we have it. It's only influencing that top edge loop. So now we can go back to our modifier and increase the segments to something like 4, and just bring this around so it looks about right. Okay, that's starting to look good. From there, we need to add the subdivision surface modifier. This is just the icing on the cake here. So we'll increase the levels viewport to 2, and we don't want this weird kind of gooey look there. We want a really sharp crease in between our bevel here and the rest of the cannon. So I'll go into edit mode and 2 to get our edges, and we'll go into wireframe just so we can see what's happening. We need to grab both these edge loops right here, and we'll hit Shift E to pull that out, and that changes the sharpness of the edge crease right there. And now we have a nice looking cannon. So now I'm just gonna actually go in and tweak a few things just so it looks just the way I want it to. Okay, that looks perfect. And the last thing we're gonna do with our object selected, we'll go into orthographic view, go tab into edit mode, and then hit Shift A, and we'll grab a UV sphere. We're gonna change the segments to 16 and change the rings to 12. We'll actually drop that down to 10. There, that looks about right to me. And now let's go ahead and just scale that down a bit. We can go into wireframe mode again so we can see what's going on. Just scaling that down. And now we'll hit G and Z and bring it down just to add that little bump at the bottom of the cannon. Just like that, a little knob. I'm not sure the official pirate term for the knob at the bottom of a cannon, but knob feels right. If at any time you deselect that by accident, don't feel like you have to go in and select all these by hand. You can select one and then hit Command L, and it selects all the related vertices. So again, you can just adjust that to where it looks right. So now that we have that, the last thing we can do here is right click and hit Shade Auto Smooth, and that smooths out all of our geometry. Now, you can still see we're getting a little bit of weirdness, and we can solve that easily by going back to the subdivision surface modifier and increasing the levels viewport and, of course, subsequently, the render viewport. So we've made our cannon, but now he needs legs to stand on. Applying the same techniques and things I just went over, I'm gonna go ahead and model out the rest of the base at turbo speed. There are some really handy modifiers that I won't cover in depth in this tutorial, but I encourage you to go and play with them on your own. Here I'm actually just using a mirror modifier, which just mirrors an object across its own origin. Modifiers are great tools that operate totally non-destructively. The modeling's all done, but now we have to worry about boring nerd stuff like lighting. Let's take a look. Now the first thing we gotta do is go over some basic housekeeping. Let's go to our preferences here. We can go to edit and down to preferences, or we can hit Command comma. And in the preferences, we'll go to this tab, add-ons. Now we'll go to the search bar up here and look up Node Wrangler right there. Let's tick that on and make sure that's enabled. We need to change our viewport here a little bit. So we'll actually go down until we get the crosshairs here. We'll drag out just like that. And let's do it again. Perfect. Let's change this top one to shader editor. And we're gonna just keep this one, the 3D viewport, and we can tick off all the extra information, close that down. And this will be where we view our camera momentarily. Now we need to go to the render properties and change the render engine from Eevee to cycles, just like that. And let's make sure we change from CPU to GPU complete. Let's go down to the viewport and change the max samples to 16. 16 is about perfect for what we need. And the render settings, let's change the max samples to something like 64 or 128. Now that all of that is out of the way, we can start making things look pretty, starting with a camera. Let's hit Shift A, go all the way down to camera, and we'll change the viewport with the little tilde key. We'll change it to view camera. Now, I'm gonna click in. Oops, in was already open. We're gonna go to view and camera to view, just like that. And now we have control of the camera from the viewport. So let's change our camera angle to something like this. And we can see what it's gonna look like down here. Same thing, tilde key, view camera. And now we have a more clean view of it right here. So let's just kind of push this around until we get something that looks about right. We want this to be right in the middle. And you know what? That works. That's perfect. So I'm going to tilde key back out of the camera. That way I don't have control of it. And there we go. Now we can see our render view, and we can actually hit Z and go up to rendered. And it's in the dark. And that's perfect for what we need. So we have everything set up. Let's start to move to world setup. Let's hit A to select all of our objects, and in the orthographic view, let's move everything up so that it's on the ground plane, just like that. Now we'll hit Shift A and add a new plane, and we'll just scale it out to about something like that. Just give it a floor to sit on. Now, with that selected, we want the shadow information of the plane, but we don't want the light information. So let's go into our object properties. Right here, it's this orange little square, and we'll tick on shadow catcher, just like that. With the shadow catcher set up, now we need to actually change our background. So let's go into our shader editor node and go to world. Now we'll just duplicate the background there, and we will add a mix shader node. And what I'm trying to do is accomplish having the background affect the light on the geometry, but the other background, the background 2 that's plugged into the bottom here, this is going to affect the color of our background without actually changing the light on the object. So we will add a light path, is camera ray, connected to the light path right there. And just to show you the desired effect, I can change the light on the cannon, but it doesn't change the background. And I can change the background color, but it doesn't affect the light on the cannon, just like that. So let's knock that all the way down to 0, and we'll change this to something like maybe a nice phthalo green or something. Yeah, that's looking about right. For this scene, we're going to do a 3-point lighting setup. So we're actually going to start by adding a rim light. Let's do Shift A, and we'll add an area light. And the area light can go just behind the cannon. I don't really want that super long shadow, so I'll just kind of dial that in. And this is just about pushing and pulling the light until it gets somewhere you like it. Something like that. Okay, now I want the intensity to be high for the rim light, so something like maybe 100. Even higher than that. Even higher than that. We'll do 250 for the rim light, and actually I might even crank it to 350. That feels better because I want that, I just like that glow on that end right there. So that feels about right, and I can maybe bring it closer. Yeah, something like that. That feels fine. Now to combat that, we need to hit Shift D and get another light. We duplicated that first light. Now we're going to use this for our fill light. So this needs to be a lot bigger for a softer shadow, but it also needs to be probably a lot more intense. So we'll crank that up to like 600. Ooh, that was too much. Okay, 400. 400. I'll take 400. So now we're just going to position this so that it's just filling the scene with light without being the primary source of light. So something in there is about good. That feels about right, because we're going to come in with our key light right here, and so we just want this to kind of fill in the gaps right there. Now we need to add a key light, so we'll hit Shift A and add a sun. Now the sun is a directional light, so you can put it anywhere in the scene, and we'll just rotate it until we get something that feels like a good key for this. Something like that. Feels good. And we're going to increase the intensity up to about 3. Whoops, I went out of my camera view. There we go, we're back in it. 3 feels a little too strong, so I'm going to dial that down to like 2.5. That feels good, but you can see we have this really hard shadow here, and I hate that. So we're going to change the angle of this to something like 130. And it softens that shadow immediately. And that's exactly what we want.
You all remember the old children's book metaphor for greed, right? If you give a mouse some lighting, he's going to want custom shaders. So let's build him some. Now, we essentially only have 2 materials here. We have wood and metal, so let's go ahead and start with the metal.
The first thing we need to do is select our cannon, and we'll change the shader type to object in the shader node editor. We'll click new, and we'll change the base color to something like a blue. Something like that is probably good. That feels cannon-y to me. Let's change the metallic all the way up to 1. We can put the roughness down, but we're going to come back and change that. So don't worry too much about that yet. Let's go down to sheen, change that to 0.5 on the weight, and add something that actually feels like our scene color. Can bring that up a good bit like that, and that will just kind of give a sheen on the edges and kind of the cracks there. That feels about right. So now we'll make our roughness map by hitting Shift A and getting color ramp. Let's go ahead and plug that in, the color, into roughness, just like that. And to see what's actually going on here, let's hit Control Shift click, and nothing is happening. But we can switch between the color ramp and the principled BSDF by just Control Shift clicking each one of those, and it will plug directly into the output. So from here, let's do a noise texture, just like that, and we'll hit Control T to add our mapping nodes. Just like that. And again, we will see what's going on with the color ramp. And we can just dial this in a little bit. So I'm going to increase the scale of the Z. And then I'll increase the scale of the texture to something like 10. Feels about right. Now I can actually bring the Z down a little bit. We can see some scrunching there. So we have our noise texture here. And we actually want to play with this a little bit more, but we want to view the material output.
So you can see that's affecting the roughness right there. But what I want to do is actually take this black and push it all the way up to a softer gray and bring it up here just to give it a subtle noise. It doesn't have to be super dramatic all the time. With the metal done, now we're actually going to move to the wood. So let's select a wooden object. We'll click new, and same principle as the roughness map, we're going to use a color ramp for the base color. Just like that. We will add a noise texture, and we'll connect the vector of the noise texture to a Musgrave texture. And we'll do Command T to just get those mapping nodes just like that. And there we go, perfect. Now we need to change it from generated to object, just like that. We'll change the scale here of the Musgrave texture to something like 2. And we can see what's going on down here, but I'm gonna go ahead and hit Z and go into material preview, just so I can see it in lower fidelity, but I can still have a good idea of what's happening in my viewport here. Now that's starting to look good, that's starting to look like wood, but we actually want it to be more exaggerated for the wood look. So we're just gonna scale in the Z axis until we get something we like. Now let's go back over here to our color ramp and just kind of play with the levels. You can see how dramatic we can actually push it. So I'm going to pull that something like there so that we have a couple of darks, but we mostly want it to just be a more subtle effect. So that's about right. And we're actually going to change these colors to the browns. So I'm going to pull this to something that's kind of a darker brown, like that, maybe in the reds family. And I'm going to change the white to something like that. That feels about good. Now we need to apply the rest of the materials to the scene. So let's grab everything that's supposed to be wooden but is not yet. And we'll grab this middle object that is wood and we'll hit Command L and link materials. Now it's very important. Everything else is orange and the one selected with the material is yellow. So we'll do the same thing. We'll select this little wheel part and then the cannon and Command L. Now we're going to hit F12 just to render it. And there it's going to render at 64 samples.
Now we'll just save as from there, and it's all yours. A beautiful, deadly little cannon. Now when you complete your masterpiece, be sure to upload it to Instagram, tag myself, Sweet Boy Motion, and School of Motion so that we can augment your artistry. I hope that you learned a few useful things and made some friends along the way.
If you like this tutorial, be sure to check out some of the courses at School of Motion, where you can learn more about 2D and 3D design and animation.
Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to subscribe to School of Motion so you don't miss a thing.